Hey guys, it's Jess, and on today's video I wanted to talk about something that's been killing my orchid roots, I guess, and the orchids itself. I did mention that I was going to talk about this maybe a few videos ago. I was talking about my orchids, I think, and then I said I was going to make a separate video about this. So here it is. I might receive some hate about it, just because it is kind of my fault, but you know what? You learn from your mistakes. So I do hope that, I'm not telling you guys, write, good things about like what I did. I'm just saying, not to be too harsh, just because there are some people that are very mean to say, the easiest way. They're very mean. So, yeah, I hope I don't really receive those mean people on my comments. But yeah, we're going to be talking about crushed oyster shells, and these are it. I bought this bag from an eBay seller, and the reason why I got this was because, if you guys remember, one of my phals species was having like floppy leaves, and other phals were also having these symptoms of floppy leafness and other calcium deficiency symptoms. So I went ahead and I bought crushed oyster shells because a lot of people, I'm pretty sure I put it on the Orchaholics Anonymous to see what people do about calcium deficiency, and people said that they put crushed oyster shells on their orchids. So I went ahead and tried that, and I only did it with my phals and my paphs and maybe just a few other types of orchids, but really it was mainly only paphs and phals. And I didn't do it to every single one on the first day. I tried it out with a few. Maybe like a week later, I noticed that everything was fine, so I went ahead and I put crushed oyster shells on all the other orchids, and I put like this much. It depended on how big the vase was, or how much water it had, how big, like what the pot size, I guess. So I adjusted it to that, and everything was doing fine, but then a few weeks later I started noticing that the roots were getting kind of shriveled and dry, kind of like if you don't water an orchid, how they get, like you can just pull them apart, not like rotted, but dry, where there's like no nothing holding the outer shell to the development of the root, so you can just pull it away. And I initially thought that it was because I was, I guess, traveling too much with my orchids, like the water change, because at that time I ordered the crushed oyster shells maybe around November. I'm pretty sure it was like early November or something. And at that time I went home for Thanksgiving, and then I went home for Christmas break, which was, the break I just took. And I thought that it was because the water changed. Maybe one of these, am I saying it right? No. I thought maybe that, where I live and where my school is at, maybe that they had such a drastic change in water where it was like doing something to my roots. But then I started thinking about it, and it wasn't that, because if that were the case, all the orchids, I have traveled with my orchids before this, and I never saw something like that. So I completely disregarded that away, I guess. So I mean, that might have taken, into account, like, that I had added this and just made it even worse, the change in water. But I was there for the whole summer with the orchids, with these orchids, well, half of them. And when I brought them here, they didn't do that. I have went home where I have needed to take some of the orchids that can't be left alone for like a week, or just a few days, and none of these have dried out its roots, I guess. So then I started thinking of everything that I've done with my orchids. Most of these I haven't repotted. I mean, yeah, I haven't repotted any of them. The full water culture is not really repotted. I mean, I changed its water whenever it's necessary, so but that's not it. The fertilizer shouldn't be it, because I would have known it was doing something to my orchids, just because I have used it for a few months now and it's never done anything, and I don't use it weekly or anything like that, so it's definitely not that. And I haven't been using it for maybe the past month and a half, just because I don't like, when I water, I just don't have time to fertilize, so it's definitely not that. So the only other thing that could be it was the crushed oyster shells, because every orchid that was experiencing this had the crushed oyster shells. So I at first was like, maybe it's not it, so I just left the oyster shells there. But then I kept, like, those roots were haunting me every time I would look at them. So this time when I was packing my orchids to come back, this time I didn't repot all my orchids, but I shook them so all the crushed oyster shells would fall out. And I regret using crushed oyster shells, because now I think that my phals, my hybrids in full water culture are dying. Like, they're, well, maybe not dying, maybe that's too drastic, but I think they are on the path to dying, because I'm going to show you guys. Because, okay, my roots were doing great, like, they were amazing. I was rescuing, if you guys remember, I did talk about me rescuing this one right here, yeah, and it had a spike growing, and it had like 2 secondary spikes, so I was really excited about that. But now it's back to being a rescue, and it's doing so bad where it has dropped me, I want to say 3 leaves already, and it's dropping a 4th, so it's going to be left only with 3. And I'm going to show you guys the roots. So I'm warning you guys, the roots are horrible. Look at this. The roots used to be this long, and now it really doesn't have any. Yeah, all the roots are rotted, so it has no roots right now. So that one's rootless, so I'm trying to save it. There is another one. This one doesn't have a name, but this one was growing a leaf, and if you can see, the leaves are wrinkly. And this one lost a leaf, but that's because it was already falling off. So here is its root system, and it had a lot of roots too. And the only roots it has are the ones that aren't touching the water. So none of these orchids have the crushed oyster shells anymore. And okay, this one is a Neophonetia fulcata, or the Vanda fulcata, whatever you guys want to call it. And it had oyster shells around here, and these are the roots that were, I guess, not touching, but were in contact with the crushed oyster shells. So we can see they're dried. This is what I was kind of talking about, but the other ones are kind of worse, just because these are more dry, more like hard. The other ones were like dry, but you can just pull them away. And these are the roots that did not touch the oyster shells. So I do water these roots when I water the whole orchid itself, and I do spray the roots. So if it was something to do with the water, I would have noticed it with these aerial roots too, but nothing is happening with these roots. So it's definitely the crushed oyster shells. And my phals species, I did obviously put some of that in them, and it obviously worked with the one that was floppy. It's not floppy anymore, but those that I did put the crushed oyster shells on top of the sphagnum, the top roots are dried out, so they're not dead. They still have roots underneath the media, so I need to repot that and cut the dry roots. So the only ones that are truly suffering are the phal hybrids that are in full water culture, and that is maybe, how many? I don't even know how many I have. Maybe like 6 to 8 orchids. I don't know how many I have, but yeah, and only 2, I want to say, are doing good, just because they had a more extensive root system, and the other ones are doing horrible like this. They have no roots. Their leaves are kind of getting shriveled. So yes, it is completely my fault. So now I'm trying to rescue all of these. But if these phals die, I will be sad, just because phals will always be my favorite type of orchid. But I won't replace them, just because I am moving away from phal hybrids into more like smaller ones like phal species and other things, you know, not like the basics that you can buy in a grocery store. So I am moving away from phal hybrids, but I'm still going to be very sad, because I will know it is completely my fault that these orchids are dying. So I am trying to save them currently. I'm not going to repot them in sphagnum moss. They will stay in full water culture, just because I did rescue some of them in full water culture, so I believe they can make a comeback in full water culture, unless, you know, I stress them out too much. So hopefully they will try to survive. But yeah, that was, I guess, story time again. About, okay, so my camera stopped recording me because it said that I reached maximum recording time, so I will stop here and just let you guys know that I took out all the crushed oyster shells from the orchids, and I will no longer be using that. So yeah, if you guys did like the video, please leave a like, comment on any future videos you guys want me to do, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you guys.